Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Lifestyle CEO Show. I'm your host, Donna Maria from DonnaMaria.com, and you have arrived at the one place where we empower you to enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way. So if you're here on the replay, thank you so much for watching the replay. Leave me a little replay note below so I can see that you came by, and if you have any questions, let me know. If you're here live, so excited to have you as usual. I'm here Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific every day, except I take the last week of the month off so that I can rest and rejuvenate a little bit. But those of you who are used to my show, so excited that you're here. If you're new, really excited to have you. So the first thing I want to share with you this morning is check it out. This is my Lifestyle CEO coffee mug. Now, let me tell you a quick story about this mug. Well, actually, not the mug, but the logo. I started hosting the Lifestyle CEO show in 2005. That's right, 2005, when my son was 3 and my daughter was 5. And my husband and I produced this show where we used to live in Bowie, outside my hometown of Washington, D.C. And this was our logo. I also wrote a book called The Lifestyle CEO. Which I'm actually having edited now. I never really published it. Like, a few people bought it and it was great. Actually, it's in my car right now. I should go get it. Or maybe my husband, who's sitting here next to me, maybe he will get it for me, because it's in the front seat, like between the middle of the car and the seat. So maybe he'll show up in a minute with it. Surprise. But anyway, so I wrote the book. I'm working with an editor now to rewrite it, I guess. And I also am... I used to have a radio show, right? It was called the Lifestyle CEO Radio Show. And that eventually became the Indie Business Podcast, because I'm the founder and CEO at the Indie Business Network. And I thought it was a good idea to have a podcast that revolved around what I did most of the time, which was the Indie Business Network. And so I stopped using the Lifestyle CEO Show for that. But I kept the mug, and I went hunting for it over the weekend, and I found it. So check it out. I'll have some more mugs made when we have a new logo done. But, tell me, by the way, do you like this logo? I like it. Like, those little figures in the background, they represent people, like women who are enjoying their lives, building their businesses, and having their way. And the lifestyle is obviously lifestyle. CEO, kind of, it looks a little corporate-y, but not really, because there's a little spiral of life in the back. And I really kind of like, oh, look what just appeared. Check it out. Okay, so here's the Lifestyle CEO book that, as you can see, I self-published back in the day. I actually ran into one of my very first Indie Business Network members a couple of months ago, and she had saved this book, believe it or not. I didn't know where my copy was, but she had saved it, and she gave it to me, and I'm so grateful for that. So listen. The 5 F's, you guys know what they are. Tell me what they are. Like, if you were in front of me, I would make you repeat them, or ask you to repeat them, because they're so central to what we do here and to what I want to empower you to do in your life, in your business. The 5 F's are finances, family, freedom, flexibility, and fun. Not necessarily in that order, right? So all of these shows revolve around one of those topics or another. There are lots of other F words, because the show now is all about FU, like FU in an empowering way, the F words. So family, freedom, finances, flexibility, and fun. That's what we mean when we say the F word around here. And so today we're going to talk about one of those words, and that word is family. It may also be extended to friends, because sometimes friends become family. But the point is, family, close friends, those sorts of people in our lives, they impact our businesses, and they impact our lives, obviously. And since there's such a flow, like, again, the little spiral, the flow of life, everything is connected. Because there's such a flow between the success of our lives and the success of our businesses, and vice versa, and the people we live with and the people that we're closest to in our families, whether we live with them or not, they impact that. So today, we're going to talk about family. And what I'm going to do is frame this a little bit in the context of the very sad news that we've been hearing lately. Of course, we all know about the recent suicides of Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade. I also, as I was trolling through the internet over the weekend, saw a story about a wrestler. I did not catch his name. I don't remember it, but a wrestler who had sadly taken his life after taking a family member's life. I think it was his wife. I'm not sure if it was more than that, but I ran across that story and I just couldn't read it. Like, I just was like, I can't take another one. And I just sort of skipped it, but I made a mental note of it, that all those things happened in 1 week. Like, these are celebrities in their own right. And I felt really so badly that I just didn't want to see another one. But, as so many people are doing today, it's causing us to talk and think more about the topic of our mental health. And this is a topic for everyone, not just people who deal with diagnosed mental conditions, but everyone. But what I want to share today is a little bit of perspective based on my experiences. Now, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a professional in any way. I'm just a person who has a story, and part of my story includes mental challenges in my family and among my close friends. So based on my experiences, I'm going to share 3 things with you that I have learned as an entrepreneur about how to continue to handle my business and press my business forward while at the same time having to be my life be integrated with mental challenges that other people are experiencing. Now, I've never personally experienced in a diagnosed way any sort of a mental health issue. That doesn't mean I don't have any, right? I do have challenges. I do have my crazy days. But I've been to therapy. I have had counselors, but I've never been diagnosed with anything. So I don't know personally from my own experience what it's like to feel some of these things, but I do know what it's like to be around people who do. And so I'm going to share from that perspective. So a little bit about me, just so you have the background that you need to know where I'm coming from, so you can put my remarks in context. Like, nothing that I'm going to say today can be looked at in a vacuum. Like, so one sentence that I say is not going to be helpful. Like, the whole thing is what's going to make a difference. And my story is a part of that, because that's the only perspective I can come from, right? So I have had 2 very close friends take their lives in my lifetime. And I don't mean people like I went to school with or people I knew. These are people that I have been friends with for over a decade. And so I knew them extremely well. I knew them intimately, and I knew their stories. I knew what they were going through. Now, I didn't necessarily know, like from a professional perspective, what was happening with them, but I lived through some of their challenges. They talked to me about them. Not that I knew what to do, but I was a friend. I was a listening ear. And at the end of the day, I know I wasn't the only listening ear, because I was friends with their friends. And so I knew that I wasn't the only person trying to be helpful. But ultimately, things did not turn out well. And that experience and those experiences have marked my entire life forever, as you might imagine. In addition to that, I do have a family member, my older brother, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia in his teens. And so as a young girl, I grew up, he's about 8 or 9 years older than me. As a young girl, I grew up in a family where this was an issue. Now, back in those days, you didn't talk about this. Like, this was not something to be discussed. And I will tell you, for those of you who don't know, in the African-American community, it's even less discussion. Like, there's so much shame around this generally, but among African-Americans, it's even worse. Because you just don't talk about it. You just figure out how to deal with it. You kind of make it go away. You just kind of ignore it. I mean, I've literally had family members who show up from out of town after being gone for years on Christmas Day at the front door in a cab without the ability to pay the cab, having come from out of state. And literally people, grown-ups in my family, passing their wallets around to pay the cabbie, and in walks this person who no one has seen forever, green eyeshadow, just really, I don't want to get too, graphic with it, but I just kind of want you to know that I have seen this up close and personal in my family. My older brother, when he was diagnosed, left the household. I remember my father telling us, don't let him in the house unless my father was home. The locks were changed. I mean, there was a whole lot of stuff that I didn't really understand at the time. But I do remember thinking about my dad and how I was watching my father and how he was handling this. And I had some issues with it at the time, and I'm going to get back to that in a second. But I just want you to have a flavor for what I've seen so you kind of know where my remarks are coming from, so that you don't like take them out of context or get them twisted in any way, or, you know, I'm not diagnosing anything. I don't know anything more than anyone else. I only know what I've been through and what I've learned through it. So based on my experiences, there's 3 things that I've learned from the perspective of a business person, from the perspective of an entrepreneur whose only income is their business, right? Like, it's not like everything could fall apart and then I could run out and get a job. It's not like everything could fall apart and someone was going to swoop in and take care of me, or I had a, you know, a silver spoon and some stock. You know, we didn't have any of that stuff. Like, this business was going to work, and I was going to make it work, or it wasn't going to work. And if it didn't work, the consequences were things I didn't even want to think about. So what I learned from my experiences, I have put to work as an entrepreneur. So I want to share 3 things that I have learned that I hope will help you if you are in a situation where you have family members, really close friends maybe, who are like family, that are dealing with mental challenges. Now, I don't mean mental challenges in a medical condition, like we call, some people might be mentally challenged. I guess I really mean mental illness, okay? So what I want you to think about is 3 things. I'm going to tell you what they are, and then I'm going to talk about them for a second. If you have any questions, please post them below. The first is to be self-aware and to listen to what's going on around you toward a particular purpose. I'm going to tell you what that is in a second, but listening and self-awareness. The second thing is to really understand that you cannot make another person do anything they don't want to do. You just cannot do it. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then the third thing is to make sure that you put a barrier between you and the drama that another person is going through that you cannot help with. Okay, I call it like, well, I'll talk about it in a second, but let's just, again, the 3 things. Number 1, awareness and listening. Number 2, the recognition that you can't force anyone to do anything they don't want to do. And number 3, the barrier. I call it, you know, maintaining your flow. We'll get to that. So firstly, listening. Like, when there is a person who is inside your life that is struggling with these sorts of things, you have to really, really listen. You have to listen and be self-aware. You have to listen externally and you have to listen internally, because you have to watch and listen what they're saying and what's going on with them, because they may not realize what they're communicating, but they are communicating certain things. And if you watch very closely, you will see that those things will impact you. Okay? And you will start to notice patterns. You will notice patterns in their lives and how they deal with things, and you're going to notice patterns in your life. And if you're not careful, you're going to notice that the patterns in your life become dependent on the patterns in their lives, and then what you have is the creation of patterns in your life that are not good for you. So you have to be aware of this. You may need therapy. You may just need to stop and sit down, meditate every day or every week, or have some time where you journal. I don't know what it is, but it's really important to be able to know what's going on. And it's hard to do that because you're in it, right? You are so in it, you can't really see it. You really have to take yourself outside yourself and try to look at it as objectively as you can and notice these patterns. If you have friends, maybe they can help you. So these patterns could be like, you might start having, you know, an extra drink every day, right? Maybe you don't drink at all. You start having a drink every day. You might have, instead of a serving of Cheetos, you might end up sitting there eating the whole bag, right? Right? Okay. You may be losing sleep. You may become hard for you to sleep. That's not good. You may become irritable with other people who have nothing to do with the situation. So just start to notice the patterns so that you can see the patterns in their lives and also the patterns in your life. And you can see that there's an impact. And once you see it, then you can begin to handle it and start to manage it in the ways that can work for you first, and then for other people and the people around you secondly. Okay, so awareness and listening. Number 2, just accept the fact that you cannot get anyone to do anything that they don't want to do. Now, you can impose consequences. You can say, unless you get help, unless you do this, I'm not going to do this. Okay, and then you can impose that consequence. But you can't make them do anything. You can take them to every counselor in the universe. You can buy the medication. You can remind them to take the medication. You can put the medication in their hand. You can beg them to take the medication. You can plead. You can cry. You can kick. You can scream. If they don't want to do it, they won't do it. And sometimes we just have to learn that the hard way. I know I have just learned it the hard way. You just learn it because your situation is going to be different. And you find out that it's not, because none of us can get anyone to do anything they don't want to do. And that's just like a universal truth of life. And the sooner you realize that, the better off you're going to be, because it lets you off the hook from feeling like you're responsible for changing this person and getting them to do what you want, getting them to seek the help that they need when they don't want it. But it also lets them off the hook, right? Because they're human and they have choices too. Like, you're not the only one with choices. They have choices as well. And we all have the ability to make choices that are good for us. We have the ability to make choices that aren't good for us. We all have free choice and free will. So it lets them off the hook because, hey, this is your life and you can live it however you want. I'm here to help. If you don't want to do this, I'll figure out how to handle that. But I just want you to know that I think this is best for you. If you don't agree, that's on you, and we'll move forward from there. But it takes you out of this sort of purgatory where you're always feeling like, today I have to help, and today I have to make this work, and today I have to do that, and today I have to force this square peg into the round hole. It's just ultimately going to drive you nuts and make the other person unhappy and miserable with you. And so it's just going to make everything harder. Okay? So deal with the fact that people do not change unless and until they want to. And when they want to, celebrate. Like, grab them and say, awesome, let's go now. But when they don't, you just kind of gotta let it go. And you've got to draw some lines in the sand, like you have until now to do this. Or we're going to have to take some other steps in our family, in our relationship, whatever it is, because we just can't keep going this way. And that brings me to my third point, which is your flow. Okay, you have to watch and manage your flow. And what I mean by that is, like, think of your life right here. Like, it's a flow. Like, there's your flow. It's a straight line. There's bumps and bruises, of course, but it's basically your flow. This is the area where you're thriving in your business, okay? You're in a flow. Okay, so if you're dealing with a person who's dealing with these sorts of challenges, their flow may be up here, it may be down here, okay? And if you are close to them, especially if they're a family member or a really close friend, your flow's here, theirs is here or here. What happens to you is this, okay? So again, that goes back to being self-aware and listening. What you want to do is stay basically in here with a little glitch every now and then, but you want to basically stay in here. And that means that you're going to have to put a buffer between your flow and where they are down here or up here. There's going to need to be a buffer, okay? So you're going to need to be the person that minimizes the impact on your flow of all the other things that are going on. Now, this is true in other sorts of arenas as well. So, for example, you have a big project you're working on and your infant is crying and unhappy, and no matter what you do, they can't be happy. Well, you're going to have to put a barrier in your mind between your project, your flow, and your baby. You got to take care of your baby, but you don't have to be drawn into their drama. Right? You don't have to start crying. You don't have to start yelling at the kid. Like, this is a baby. Like, babies don't. They don't know what they're doing. You have to just be aware of what's happening. And then you have to realize, babies don't have a choice. So number 2 doesn't really matter because they don't have a choice. It's just crying. Something's making them unhappy. And, with a baby, you never know what that is. But you have to separate yourself from that drama. You have to deal with it, but you don't have to be drawn into it. Okay, so that's the best analogy I can come up with. You got to stay in your flow. You got to get the project done. Maybe that means you delegate part of the project. Maybe it means you save the project for tomorrow. But whatever it is, you have to protect that space in your head, because if you don't, again, you will be back at number 1. You will be in the drama. You will be drawn in. The patterns will drag you down eventually. And, over time, that's the end of your entrepreneurial enterprise. So just to summarize, based on my experiences, I hope this is helpful to you. It's really helped me. Listening and being self-aware and trying to dissect what's happening, not why it's happening. And this is crucial. Like, why it's happening is irrelevant at the end of the day. Okay? And unless you're the professional, like, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know why it's happening. I stopped trying to, you have to stop trying to figure out why it's happening. I remember with my brother, there were all these situations and circumstances in our home. And I was like, why is this happening? It's like, eventually I was like, I don't care why it's happening. This is not good. So I want to go back a little bit to something I learned from my dad, and I'm going to wrap it up with this little lesson. When my father changed the locks and told us not to let our brother in, I felt like, gee, that's like so mean. You're so mean. I never said that to him, but I thought to myself, that sounds awful. Like, how could you do that? This is your child. And then I made a mental note, right? I was like, well, I'm always going to be really, really good, so nobody ever locks me out of the house. But that's my, childish way of thinking back then. But I do remember in the middle of the night, sometimes after my brother left, the phone would ring. And like back in those days when the phone rang, everyone heard it because I was like super loud. There weren't any cell phones. If the phone rang, everyone knew the phone was ringing. So my father would answer the phone, and I could hear him in the kitchen. All the bedrooms in our house were on the same floor as the kitchen. And I could hear him asking questions. I could only hear his side of the conversation. I was listening because I was awake, and it was like 2 in the morning. And why would someone be calling my house at this hour? And why is my father talking to them? And I would hear my father saying, well, where is he? How is he? Does he have a place to sleep? Does he have any clothes? Does he have any money? And it dawned on me that this was someone that was calling about my brother. Like, this was a homeless shelter. We found out later it was in California. Like, that's where he ended up. A priest, there was a priest I remember who called once, and he had great compassion on my brother, and he wanted to be helpful with him. And my brother would carry my father's information around his wallet. And so my dad would put on his clothes, and I later found out that on these evenings or these nights in the middle of the night, he was going out to a Western Union place, which was how you transferred money back then, so he could send some money to whoever the person was that had called about my brother. Sight unseen, like it could have been anybody on the street taking the money to buy drugs. My dad didn't know, but what I learned from that was that my father had placed a buffer. Like, he had a flow. My dad had little children to support, a wife to support. He had a job that was very good, and he was really good at what he did, and it was his passion. He had a place of flow that was important to him. But he also knew that he couldn't change his child. He couldn't make my brother get help, and he tried. I remember many conversations where I didn't know what was happening at the time, but now, all these years later, I get it. I started to understand it as I grew up because I watched it. So he wasn't able to help him at all. So he relaxed in that. He let that go. Like, this is not, I can't fix this. What I can do is put a buffer between you and my flow and help you however I can. And that's what he was doing. He would get up in the middle of the night and go send this money. And the next day it would be like it never happened. Because remember, these are things we didn't talk about back then. My brother has since gotten treatment. He is back home. Things are not perfect, but they're way better than they were. We can actually talk to him. He's on some medication, kind of off and on. But when he's on it, we know that he's doing well. And, it's still a challenge. His life is not easy. It's not easy. But there's a buffer. There's a buffer. There's a place in there where I have to maintain my flow, where my younger brother, who does most of the work with my older brother, it's not me, it's my younger brother who's like a hero. That's a whole nother story. He handles him. He handles his money. He handles his attorney, his Social Security money. I don't mean he's got a lot of money, but got some benefits that come to him as a result of what he's dealing with. I think he has jobs every now and then at grocery stores, Goodwill. So he's doing better than he was. But my point is, what I learned from my father is what I'm sharing with you now. He was self-aware. He realized that there was nothing he could do to force my brother to get help. And he stayed in his flow. And he was helpful where he could be without destroying his flow. And he was a loving father without compromising the things that he had to take care of in his life. So that's what I have to say about that. I hope that if you have a friend or a family member that you love that's dealing with mental illness, that they get help. Suicide prevention hotline. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but Google it. You can help in that way. Help in any way you can. But remember, that you also have to take care of yourself and your situation and stay in your flow so that you're able to maintain whatever lifestyle you have chosen, whatever lifestyle makes your life proceed along the lines that you want it to, while at the same time being helpful and keeping that buffer in place. So I hope that was helpful to you. That was deep. I gotta take some deep breaths now. I went way back. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. If you would like to share a story, I would love to hear it. This is not easy stuff. There's no right answers. There's only ways to manage, and we do our best to manage, and that's all we can do. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern, 7 o'clock a.m. Pacific, right here on the Lifestyle CEO Show. Pose with my fancy old logo. Let me know what you think of the logo, okay? Because I like it. Some people tell me it looks kind of old-fashioned. I like it. What do you think? Let me know, okay? Have a great day. Bye-bye.